Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today we're going to be going over Louhi. This is going to be my first review on my new computer, so hopefully nothing breaks here. But Louhi is our new unit coming to us with the Nutcracker lottery event that's currently going on JP, which I say currently going on. Actually, as of the recording of this video, they have been down for maintenance for a long time. Hopefully it comes up right away, right after. Louhi is going to be a 5-star permanent AoE quick Berserker. Now, that's an interesting combination of things. Usually when you have a permanent unit, a lot of people think, I don't need to roll this unit. I'm going to wait, see what happens. But it's definitely something that I'm going to say in her case, you're going to still want to pay attention to her as a unit. Now, a lot of people are probably going to be caught up on the looks department. There does appear to be an ascension for everybody here. But again, Louhi is going to be a unit that even after this event should be acquirable due to that permanent nature. With her being a 5-star quick Berserker, she's going to join the list of a couple of other options there, and particularly she kind of does right what some of the others do wrong. We're going to talk about that as we go through her kit, some of the stuff I do really like about her, and again, give you guys some food for thought here. So starting out basically with Louhi's actual attack power here, you guys can see she's up at 12.8k attack. It's definitely a very nice number. We're knocking on the door to 13k. It's very powerful. She's going to card quite hard because of it, and definitely a nice thing. The trade-off here is, oh boy, is her HP anemic, especially for a 5-star. So be very careful with this. This is certainly, still a robust amount when you start comparing to lower rarities. But at least for a 5-star, this is definitely in a warning zone of area where you might want to make sure that you have adequate protection, that you're bringing some way if the enemy has the opportunity to return fire, that Louhi can stay up. She does have some survivability in her kit though, so it's not going to be a complete issue, but it will still be something you want to think about. Her attribute here is Earth. She has 9-star absorption, one lower than the average of 10 for Berserkers. But admittedly, this is something that we're just kind of used to with Berserkers in general, so don't expect it to be too crazy. Her star generation rate is 5%. This is also nothing really to write home about, but she does have a decent amount of hits on an NP, so we can talk about that here in a bit. Her NP charge attack is 0.54. This is actually not terrible. It's pretty much right on average. Usually, especially for a Berserker, we'll see higher than average NP gain rates. But given the fact that she's not a buster-based one, this is kind of where they're tempering it some. Still, she actually has everything in her kit, I think, in this regard to succeed. So this is actually not a concern at all. You got the 5% NP charge defense, which is actually too higher than normal, but this is fairly normal for Berserkers. She's got a higher than average death rate here of 35.7%, and her alignment's going to be neutral evil. She is female gendered. Her basic traits are Servant, 7 Knights Servant, weak to Enema Elish. And then in stage 1 and 2, she is Hominid, Servant, and Humanoid. In stage 3, she has animal characteristics and Demonic Beast. This is actually going to be another really nice thing, as we do occasionally see certain events that particularly hone in on having that Demonic Beast trait for some reason. She is also levitating and non-hominidae, as well as a wild beast. So quite a bit of stuff there going on. Her basic deck here is going to be the Double Buster, Double Quick deck that we've come to know and love for our quick units. Again, this gives her viability with Original Scotty as well as Summer Scotty. It's going to mean that she does have the capability of producing crits with either of those two card types, which is going to comprise 80% of her deck. Obviously, the single arts card then is a concern if you're worried about NP gain with cards, but at least it is a 4-hit, and again, at a basically 0.54 NP gain rate, not including other forms of buffs that she might have. This is still actually going to be pretty decent for her. So all in all, I don't have any issues with the deck. Again, the hit counts here are all above average, with the only exception being the extra attack at 5 being average. Taking a look at her active skills here, the first one is going to be party-wide quick and buster performance for 3 turns, 20%. This, while it would be concerning because it is only 20% here, the upside is that it's party-wide, so she's going to buff not only herself, but also, again, somebody else in the party. This is going to make her functional as not only a devoted, like kind of damage dealer in a composition, but also as one of the cogs in a multi-damage dealer type of setup. So she can kind of be the setup man or herself be the selfish damage dealer. She's going to grant her party evasion for 1 attack 3 turns. This also has potential applications. I think the only thing I don't like about this is that this does not stack with someone like, say, Scotty's. I think this is a issue at this point that they really need to address, is the overall survivability of Quick in a challenge scenario. Quick definitely can crit things down. It can definitely min turn stuff. But when it comes to actually managing to stay up under the heat of pressure from an enemy, this is something I think that needs to be worked on. So having the ability for this to be stackable would make it better. But still, this is definitely nice. We see this with units like, David, Balbon, Tristan. They basically all have some sort of like party-wide protection in their kit. And it's definitely a good thing that she has this. So this is going to be her form of self-survival. It's not going to be the best, but it's going to be at least enough to get you through an enemy's NP. And then on top of that, she's going to add the Darkness Battlefield to the field for 5 turns whenever you use this skill, which again, with it all on a 6-turn cooldown, if Lord, means you have quite a bit of uptime here for this. She unfortunately does not use the Darkness Battlefield herself in any way, shape, or form, but she can be a nice person to set up another unit that would use it. So it is something to be considered. You can see it's also going to be just like basically Millennium Castle Battlefield that Arcuid has, where it's now going to be detached from the Servant itself. It's going to be in the top right. This does mean that it will go away if she dies, but it also means that it cannot be buff stripped off of the unit. So it is a nice thing in terms of preventing the enemy from being able to get rid of it as easily. The second skill here, as you guys can see, is going to stun all enemies for 1 turn. Now, I haven't seen any stated rates on this stun. I am going to say that keep in mind that there is usually some manner of resistance. It's not going to work on a unit that's stun immune. It's not going to work on a unit that's debuff immune. But this is a fairly nice skill, especially since you don't have to level the skill to gain the capacity to its fullest extent. Just keep in mind, again, resistances can happen. This is also going to remove their defensive buffs. Now, remember, this is basically going to be everything that they could use to defend themselves with one real annoying exception, and that's going to be Guts. Guts is not considered a defensive buff. It's considered a restorative buff. Therefore, it is not going to be covered in this. So just watch out for an enemy with Guts if you're using Louhi and you're trying to remove the enemy's defensive skills. But it does mean it's going to be very difficult for you to stop her. Keep in mind, though, too, it cannot remove anything that is got that sort of white border around it, something that is designed to be a fight-specific mechanic in that regard. She will not have the capacity to remove that with this skill. She's also going to inflict poison and curse to the enemy for 5 turns with them. While she herself does not gain any sort of power modifier or anything off of this, this is something that you could use in tandem with other craft essences or things if you wanted to kind of get a little bit more out of it. Or again, if you wanted to use her as a setup man for somebody else in the party that maybe does scale off of that damage type. She's then going to also reduce the target's healing for 5 turns, which definitely a nice thing since it's pretty much the entire enemy wave that she's hitting here. And then again, this is going to be up to 50%. So this could be a good sort of kind of prevention mechanic in a challenge scenario where you've got an enemy that's just spamming healing. This is going to really reduce that on them and kind of cut down on their ability to recover from any of the amount of damage you're dealing. Now, all of this is on a 7-turn cooldown. Again, it is worthy of noting there is some survivability built into this skill, so it is what it is. But this is a relatively longer cooldown, so don't expect to be able to spam this one too often. Her third skill here is going to be a charge to her own gauge of up to 80%. You're really going to want to lore this skill, if you ask me. This is going to allow her, in conjunction with her maxed out mana loading, to go 0 to 100 just like that on her own, under her own power. So definitely a really nice thing in terms of, obviously refund scenarios, her looping through a node, her having enough charge to be able to handle things. But also just in general, this is going to make it really good for her in sort of a, one-off scenario where she just needs to take out a wave but maybe buff the rest of the party. This is going to work out really, really well for her. We kind of see them shifting this way with Quick, where they're trying to put a little bit more power into the hands of the actual damage dealing unit, because I think they know the overall status of the Quick supports is what it is at the current moment in time. Again, they're not terrible, they're not bad, but they're not as overpowering and just, fight changing in some degrees as some of the other meta supports kind of can be. From here, she's also going to charge the party's gauge except for herself by an additional 20%. So again, you're looking at 80% for herself, but 20% for the other guys right there is really going to be nice, really allow them to kind of get to their own NPs maybe and really help things out. It's not the 30%, but that probably would have been overkill just in terms of the sheer amount of charge added by one skill. But definitely this is a powerful, powerful addition. You are going to want to lure this. From here, it's also going to reduce all enemies' critical attack chance for 3 turns. This is nothing to sneeze at because, again, as you guys can see, she's got 30% here, and this is enough to really hamper a lot of enemies' sort of base chance to crit attack an enemy. So essentially, as long as they're not having like crit buffs and stuff, this is going to probably outright prevent a lot of classes from critting altogether. Her passive skills here, she gets Madness Enhancement C. This is going to improve her own Buster performance a little bit. So definitely nice there if you're going for those Buster crits with Summer Scotty. Magic Resistance A to increase her own debuff resistance by 20%. Just going to make it harder for you to land debuffs against her. And then Territory Creation A to help out the performance of that singular arts card. Now, with regard to the appends, obviously mana loading just going to be the king here because of that 80% charge skill. It's going to pair out really well with that, especially for a turn 1 thing. It's really going to open the doors in terms of craft essences that you can use. And you guys can see, this is going to allow her to basically go 0 to 100 if you have this skill maxed. Her third append here is nothing to write home about. This is the issue that you usually have with Berserkers. Unfortunately, the third append on Berserkers is usually not worth the coins. The reason for this has to do largely with the fact that it is so situational. Again, yeah, if you're going up against Saber enemies and they are hitting her and they do have the opportunity to crit, this could help. But if you're not up against Saber enemies at all, this is relatively worthless. And if you're not up against a unit that is hitting you, this is also worthless. So in farming scenarios, this is completely not an issue. And again, if you are in a scenario where you are getting hit, you're probably doing something a little bit wrong, as you really don't want your Berserkers getting hit most of the time. So her fourth one here with the additional crit damage, this could definitely be a solid one. Or again, something like the skill reloading to reduce those skill cooldowns to a more usable level, at least for getting back to them the first time. Maybe not the best. You're not as synergistic as you would be with, say, something like a Buster-centric comp with Koei and Sky with all the cooldown reduction flying around. But this could still be useful to you in getting back to again, the second and third skill there a little bit faster. For her Noble Phantasm, as you guys can see, it is a quick AoE 6-hit NP. Definitely nice in that regard. It's not like in the 8 and 10 range that we would really like to see a quick NP be, but it's still, nothing crap like the, 3-hit range that would be really awful for a quick NP. She's going to increase her own NP generation rate by 20% for 30 turns, activating first. I did call this into question. We'll talk about it when I get through with this, but this is an interesting thing. Again, having NP gain is usually a really nice thing on our quick units. They really desperately need it in a lot of circumstances, and they function very synergistically with it. So it's a good thing that she has this. It is a 3 turn, so this means as you NP after NP, it's going to keep stacking. So this is a really, really nice thing for her to have. She's going to then deal damage to all enemies and then inflict burn after damage there for 1,000 damage over 5 turns, and then increase the party's NP generation rate except for herself by 20% for 3 turns. So again, setting someone else up potentially. Her overcharge effect increases her own NP damage for 3 turns, activating before damage. Definitely nice there. And then increases the party's NP damage except for herself for 3 turns as well after damage. So you're getting 20%, and it scales all the way up to 40% in both these cases. The kind of thing that I had to point out here is this is actually rather weird to me. I cannot come up with, for the life of me, a significant reason why they would want to do things this way. They basically split out these 2 effects, and they really didn't need to. They could have simply just said, hey, this increases the party's NP gain and the party's NP damage, and just let it be what it's going to be. The fact that it's, sort of split by, hey, it activates first on herself, then she deals damage, then it activates for the party, you're not really going to have scenarios where the enemy actually gets to act before the end of her NP anyways. So this is relatively a moot point, and it feels like they just did it in a weird way in terms of the amount of like lines of code that they had to do. Maybe there's a reason for it. I can't think of it. It's nothing really to be worried about. It's just odd that the devs did this. So again, very good NP. Maybe my only concern over this would be the lack of burn before the damage of the NP goes out, but that's not a huge concern. So let's talk craft essences in that regard and suggestions for that. So you can see my very first one is going to be Honey Lake, and therefore that's exactly why I mentioned the burn. So Honey Lake, as you guys know, she doesn't really have invuln pierce as an option, but she does admittedly have the ability to remove defensive buffs. It's just going to be a, hey, like if something were to happen and maybe you would already use the skill that's on cooldown, here's your invuln pierce option. Honey Lake's just arguably going to be one of the best ones. It's going to give her a 40% power mod. It's going to be all attack scaling. Obviously, your issue, though, is getting your hands on Honey Lake as it came from the Summer 5 event. So it's not easy to kind of get copies of it anymore. But again, the fact that it's got that burn synergy already built in is there. Just make sure you use like a command code or something with burn on it so that you can apply it for the first NP rather than waiting for it to be stacked on enemies. If you needed another more permanently available option, Decapitating Bunny is also a decent one. This one's purchasable in the shop now on JP. Again, permanently. It's all attack scaling, invuln pierce, and quick up. So not the worst of items for you. But I think our bread and butter that we're going to be going with is going to be something like Black Grail. Again, she can start from 0. You're just going to want high octane firepower on her. Now, Black Grail does have a little bit of a trade-off. While it does get more attack power than your average C, scaling all the way up to 2400, and it does at MLB have 80% here. Oh, hold on. Let me tend to Aurelia here as she is going wild. Don't want her covering up too much of the screen there. So basically, at that point, again, this scales really, really well. But admittedly, the downside is that you're going to lose the 500 HP every turn. This is not terrible for her, but it is a thing. There is an option for you, though, as a Berserker, and that's going to be Phantasmal Princess. This is another permanently available CE. It's newer than Black Grail, but it's still useful. This one only scales up to 2,000 instead of 2,400, but it has the exact same effect at MLB as Black Grail with none of the downside. It is specific only to Berserkers, so this will work really well for Louhi, and it will save you that additional 500 HP per turn demerit, assuming that is a concern for you. If you do happen to find yourself in a scenario where you need a 50% C, Traces of Christmas is a really good one. It's also all attack scaling, gives quick up, NP gain up, and 50% gauge, but it's not permanently available. So if you want a permanently available one, Holy Night Supper is at least going to be a decent one. It's also all attack scaling and gives NP damage of 15% and critical damage of 15% with the 50% gauge. So definitely another nice suggestion there. All right, now let's talk about Louhi's actual refund, as I know this is going to be like kind of the big question a lot of people are going to have. Surely she's a quick unit. She has 80% charge built into her kit, so her refund's going to be bad, right? Well, about that. So when it comes to this sort of scenario, you would normally think this to be the case, but basically taking a look at Louhi's actual numbers, if we're using 2 times Summer Scotties against 3 neutral enemies, then basically at that point, at only 3 out of a possible 18 overkill hits, aka 1 hit for each of the 3 enemies that killed them, at that point you're already looking at 31% refund, almost 32% rounding up there. So, you know, I would have expected something in the like 20% or less range for a unit like this. The fact that this is easily in the 30% range with just double Summer Scotty is actually really good. That's astonishingly good. Keep in mind what we said earlier, that she has the aspect that allows her to increase her own NP gen by 20% over 3 turns that will stack. And this becomes actually quite nice. This does mean that foreseeably in certain circumstances, if you can get enough hits, you can actually refund back to 50% by something like, say, turn 3. If you're running a triple Scotty setup, this can maybe be done even as early as turn 2. So it is something to think about nonetheless, but it is a very, very intriguing thing, as does mean that you could potentially get yourself into a scenario where you could functionally sit there and just say, hey, I'm just going to use double Summer Scotty and not even have to rely on a third support. But it is what it is. So just, I'm going to say for something like that, you're going to need to test it on individual nodes to be sure whether or not it would work. The thing about Louhi is, again, she does have really good charge built in. So having the ability to hit even, say, like 2 neutral enemies, Louhi can still, at 2 out of a possible 12 hits, still refund 20% right there, just off that. So, like I said, that's kind of the amount that you would expect with a lot of other quick units out there, especially with low NP gain, but she actually managed to get the job done. Let's talk about those actual charging scenarios now. Now, Louhi, as you know, can handle 3 enemy waves. She can handle 2 enemy waves based off what we just tell you. But Louhi can also potentially handle 1 enemy waves, aka 1-1-X nodes. So that's 1 enemy in the first wave, 1 enemy in the second wave. We don't care how many enemies in the third wave. So in this scenario, you guys can see we're going to be using double Summer Scotty and Oberon. We're going to start her out with a 50% C. From there, she's going to go ahead and get 50% from one of the Summer Scotties, basically get the other Summer Scotties buffs. And then at that point, she's at 100% charge, so she'll fire off the NP. She would only refund 8% in this scenario, but we do have her 80% charge. So we're going to go ahead and pop that, and we're going to go ahead and pop Oberon's 20% charge there, as we will have rotated the first Summer Scotty out. And boom, there you go. You're at 100% again. And then from there, you just have the 2 remaining 50% charges in the composition. So Louhi, with just her ability to provide 80% charge to herself, just able to basically function. Even here, we're using a 50% C, but if you had her append, in theory, you could start her out with, say, like a 30% C if you actually had it. So that is something to think about, is the capacity for this to work, again, in very, very like malleable situations where you don't necessarily have an idealistic looping setup. This makes Louhi one of the better refunders for quick as far as we're concerned. Yeah, she brute forces it with charge, but that's really all you kind of need to do nowadays. Refund is difficult to pull off in a lot of scenarios, so making a unit 2 refund base is not a good idea long term in terms of how devs are designing nodes these days. Up against a 3-3x Berserker node. So the reason that it's going to be Berserker is going to be because this would hamper her refund. Berserkers are not a good class to refund against. You can see at this point, we don't even need the NP. We don't even need a craft essence. We can start her out from 0. Basically, pop both the Summer Scotty's buffs, rotate one of them for Oberon, fire off the NP because you're already at 100% there. She's going to refund about 25%. Basically charge herself to full again, do it again, and then from there she's going to get 29%, just barely. Again, this is due to that stacking NP gain that she gets every time. That's just enough to round into Oberon's 70% charge, and he just finishes the loop there for the final NP. Against 3 neutral enemies, again, pretty much the exact same deal for how you want to do it. And again, you can even go against 3 neutral enemies as long as you can get 4 out of 18 overkill hits in wave 2, which is very doable for most circumstances. Again, against 3 enemies, that's just 1 more overkill hit than necessary. So usually there's some low health enemies in the wave and maybe just 1 or 2 high health enemies. So in this scenario, we actually can work with Nero Bride. So we don't even need, again, something crazy for this to work. But basically, we can end up making it work essentially with a 20% append, going ahead, utilizing Nero Bride's skills, rotating her for the other Summer Scotty here, popping both Summer Scotty's quick ups and, second skills, and then basically the Summer Scotty charge skill there. That's going to bring her up to 100% there for turn 1, fire off the NP, refund 43% there, charge herself with her 80% charge skill, fire off the NP again, refund 49%, And then boom, there you go, the remaining Scotty 50% charge to finish it off. So again, Louhi can work in any number of node setups, and this is really nice. And this is just focusing primarily on refunding just with her, not even necessarily trying to use her in a multi-damage dealer type of situation. Taking a look at Louhi's self-damage buff numbers. Now, these are, again, neutral numbers. So we're not considering class effectiveness. We're not considering anything really in terms of external buffs either. So no mystic codes, no craft essences, no support casters or anything like that. It's just Louhi against a neutral target under her own power, which admittedly not likely that you find a neutral target very often with the Berserker, but here you go. So in this sort of scenario, you guys can see neutral damage. She's only going to do about 24k there at MP1. At MP5, the scales all the way up to 40k. Remember, she doesn't have niches. She doesn't have extra damage that she can really amp. So this may seem bad to you, but what we're going to show you right here is, again, now in the next scene, this is still going to be neutral damage, but this is now Louhi actually in a proper composition where we do include things like the Mystic Code, the Craft Essence, and obviously the supports. You guys can see this is double Summer Scotty, Oberon, a level 100 Black Grail, and a Neo Plug suit. You got 138k there in wave 1, 151k in wave 2, where even though the support buffing hasn't really changed too much, remember she's getting that stacking NP damage as well, and then a whopping 378k there by wave 3, despite the fact that she doesn't have a niche. Now remember, these are still neutral numbers, so because she's at least going to be 1.5 times effective in most scenarios, you get to multiply these numbers by that. But essentially, the way to look at this is just the raw synergy between Louhi's kit, Oberon, and that Black Grail are really just amping damage here for wave 3. And you can see by NP2, this already kind of just starts going a little bit haywire there. Now, in this scenario, we actually use a level 100 cranking. Don't worry about the C. I know this is a Buster C. This is just done because it's 50% charge and it's all attack scaling. So again, that's really what they're after with this. But essentially, this is just to kind of show you in a 50% scenario, maybe against single enemy, like a 1-1X node. This is kind of what the damage would be. It would not be amazing, but it would also not be terrible. You would still have quite the capacity to actually amp her up. Now, let me go ahead and close that one because let's go back to the actual normal numbers that we'll look at. And we do have some interesting comparisons, particularly Sinno Rikyu is going to be your other immediate comparison that everyone will draw. So she's also capable of the exact same type of setup here with Oberon, Black Grail, double Summer Scotty. But what you're seeing is outside of the man niche that she can provide, she is actually going to end up losing basically point for point against Louhi in that regard. So essentially, yes, if you do have the niche in play for her, she can outperform her, but without it, Louhi is going to be the stronger unit. And this is a feather in Louhi's cap, as again, remember, Louhi is a permanent unit, so even if you decide not to roll, you could end up getting spooked by her, or for instance, you might just say roll one copy and then get spooked by more later, making you have more NP levels against someone like maybe if you only had an NP1 Sin. So it is something to consider here, just how much damage you can actually pump. And this one right here is going to be the triple Scotty. Sorry, I had to look at it for a second. The triple Scotty scenario. So you can see a lot more kind of just sameness here on waves 1 and 2 because nothing's really changing. Usually in a triple Scotty setup, you immediately rotate for the third Scotty. And therefore, you're already in wave 1 basically performing with essentially all of your buffs online at that point. So this is why you don't have nearly as much damage for wave 3, but you do end up with a better wave 1 and wave 2 performance should you need it, maybe due to the structure of the node. So it is food for thought. It is something to think about. But yes, again, that's going to be your comparison right there. Now, comparing to someone else here, we do have Lancelot Berserker. He can also function with double Summer Scotty Oberon and a 50% CE. He's not really going to be able to do it with Black Grail at the current moment in time unless you card down a wave or something. So again, this is a 4-star basically compared against 5 stars. It's not necessarily fair. But yeah, you can see NP1 numbers. They're respectable, but they're definitely on the weaker end here. Thankfully, a lot of people will have a higher NP level, and you can see 274k there. Again, not amazing, but certainly doable for like normal farm nodes, stuff that's like not 90 plus plus or star or anything like that. God Juna is also going to be another one here. We can compare him, as a lot of people obviously like to. He's going to be another 50% CE, though. He does have the man niche thanks to access to Koyanskaya of Light. So you can see a little bit of extra firepower can certainly compete if it is man trait. But considering we did have Sinnoh Rikyu here who could also do man trait, she would just arguably be the better option if man comes into play. Summer Ibuki is also another option here, as she's able to work with Castoria Oberon at level 100 Black Grail. You can see, again, she would lose as well just with raw damage. But if you're looking at the Earth niche, then she's super effective in that scenario. She'll absolutely pop off. And then, of course, the current Titan, basically, Summer Musashi here, able to work with a Black Grail, assuming the node permits it, because she doesn't have charge. So you can see, raw power, yes, she will still win, but admittedly, the Saber niche there is what really just powers her to such insane heights. So quite a bit of capability there. But remember, in Musashi's case, she's almost entirely refund based. So Louhi's probably going to be able to do certain nodes that a Musashi wouldn't be able to, just due to that, again, 80% charge that she has. Let me know what you guys think about Louhi. Do you guys feel like she's a good unit? Do you guys feel like she's a skip unit? Do you guys feel like she's kind of disgustingly good for a quick unit? To me, I'm somewhere in between all of that. I do really like her access as a permanent unit for a quick unit. I do feel like there's some things that I wish were done a little bit different, but I think they gave her every tool that she needs to succeed in terms of what a modern quick unit needs, with both that NP gain and that charge in there. And again, I do think she has quite a bit of nice utility, even though she doesn't have the niche damage. So which Ascension's your favorite as well? And again, I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. Thank you all for all the support as always, and I will see you guys for the next one.